Hello everyone, bonjour tout le monde. Merci d'être ici avec nous aujourd'hui. Thank you for being with us here today on the traditional territories of the Mississauga of the Credits, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat. Nous sommes ici sur les territoires traditionnels des Mississauga, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, et Huron-Wendat. This is yet another wonderful region of Toronto Centre. We're doing a tour of the neighborhoods. Here we find ourselves on the Esplanade. Again, we have co-op housing around here. We have mixed income housing around here. Another example of the kind of mixed and diverse community that can be created when different levels of government invest. We are here also because this neighborhood, this community, and the community of Toronto Centre was one that was very hard hit during the pandemic, not only in the first wave, but in the second and in the third as well. C'est une communauté qui a été très fort touchée par la pandémie. On a eu beaucoup d'infections, des taux très élevés d'infections ici, and many members of this community died and died unnecessarily. And so we have said that one of the questions and one of the themes for this election must be, what is a life worth, and what will we be willing to do to protect lives in the future? One thing, of course, that we could have chosen to do, and the government should have chosen to do, is not to call this election in the first place. We are in the fourth wave, and in the case of this community, it is a community that is trying desperately to get back on its feet after many, many months of hardship, many months of loss. And so as we begin to reflect on the previous stages, the earlier stages of the pandemic, we know that it has laid bare important gaps in our social safety net at all levels of government, scrambled in one way or another to plug those holes. We must do better to avert the most catastrophic outcomes in the future. This moment is a critical opportunity for us to lay the foundations for better social policy and better social care in the future. We need to be better prepared when crisis strikes, and there is no question that the federal government has a critical role to play. Une des responsabilités clés du gouvernement fédéral, c'est de protéger les gens, c'est d'assurer la sécurité nationale, c'est d'assurer la sécurité de ses frontières. And so national security and the security of all those within the frontiers of Canada is a critical responsibility for the federal government, and we see that there are weaknesses that need to be addressed. So what are some of the things that the Green Party of Canada would do to ensure that we are better prepared in the future for future pandemics? Because unfortunately we know that there will be future pandemics. First, we gave up some time ago on our capacity to manufacture pharmaceuticals here in Canada. We absolutely need to ensure that in the future, Canada has a robust capacity for pharmaceutical manufacturing. Il faut avoir une capacité de fabriquer nos propres médicaments ici au Canada. We also need to ensure that we have an adequate and up-to-date and useful stockpile of personal protective equipment. We learned that lesson the hard way in the early days of the pandemic. We know that we lost many of our long-term care residents because of the absence of personal protective equipment in the early days. And speaking of our long-term care, we lost more people in long-term care than any other wealthy country in the world by a large margin. We had the worst record for deaths in long-term care. We saw our healthcare system brought to its knees during the pandemic as well. And so this is the time for us to reimagine and redesign and reevaluate the healthcare needs of our country, the needs in long-term care, and how we can ensure that they are designed in a way so that when these disasters strike, they are not again thrown immediately into crisis. Notre système de centres de soins d'hébergement et de soins de longue durée doit être réimaginé. Nous avons perdu trop de personnes, des milliers de personnes sans que ça soit nécessaire, exactement parce que le système n'était pas à l'auteur de protéger ces vies. Canada also needs to ensure that it protects its domestic food security. We may forget now, but we shouldn't, that there were regions in Canada, cities in Canada, where our food supply was at the risk of running out within a few days because of the interruption of supply chains. Never again should we be in a position where we cannot ensure the food security of Canada, particularly in a country that is so rich and abundant in fertile lands. Il faut aussi assurer que nous avons une task force, un panel intergouvernemental qui peut être activé d'une manière très rapide quand nous sommes dans une situation d'urgence. Throughout this pandemic, the Green Party has said in Parliament, through petitions, through motions, through requests for emergency debates, we have asked for the creation of an intergovernmental task force to coordinate all the elements of the pandemic that would have benefited from such coordination. Even today, we have many people in Canada who don't know, do I wear a mask inside? Do I wear a mask outside? When is it safe to take it off? How much protection will my vaccination give me? Is it safe to send my kids back to school? What are the thresholds for closing businesses or opening them up again? There were many elements that would have benefited from coordination. And we must accept that and ensure that we can launch that kind of intergovernmental cooperation as quickly as it is needed, as often as it is needed for a pandemic. Il faut aussi assurer que les scientifiques et les experts sont aux premières files en ce qui concerne les recommandations. Unfortunately, we saw during the pandemic, and we see to this day, that the scientists and health experts are not always fully involved in the decisions about how we attack a pandemic, how we better protect people during a pandemic, and unfortunately politics more than once has crept into the decision making about critical elements of our pandemic response. We should be guided by science, we should be guided by the experts. Politics has no place in those decisions. And then finally, the climate and biodiversity, the climate and environment. C'est très important de lancer un plan ambitieux pour la mitigation de le réchauffement climatique, précisément parce que l'accélération de notre changement climatique provoque des événements extrêmes. Ça provoque l'intensification de la destruction de notre biodiversité, et ça c'est quelque chose qui provoque des pandémies. Climate mitigation is going to be absolutely key to our response. We know that the warmer our planet gets, the more hostile it becomes to biodiversity. The less biodiversity we have, the more likely it is that we will have pandemics. And the more likely it is that we will have pandemics crossing over from animal species to us. And so as we talk about how we can protect ourselves during pandemics, let us take every opportunity to ensure that we are limiting the amount of pandemics that we have to face in the first place. And we can only do that by countering biodiversity loss and by limiting and by mitigating climate change as well. Alors, ce sont des éléments clés d'une stratégie compréhensive pour assurer que les Canadiens et Canadiennes seront mieux protégés dans l'avenir quand il y a des pandémies. Il y a des choses même qu'on peut faire maintenant pour assurer qu'on sort de cette quatrième vague le plus tôt possible. These are things that are absolutely doable. They are doable with political will and leadership. They are doable with cooperation and collaboration between levels of government. They are necessary if we are willing to. They're necessary if we are seeking to better protect people here. And so when we ask ourselves, what is a life worth? And as Canadians consider that during this election, we should say that it's worth enough to insist that they send people back to Ottawa that are willing to work together towards these common goals to ensure that everyone is better protected here and elsewhere the next time that a crisis strikes. And of course, none of us hopes that that will be anytime soon, but we need to be prepared when that happens. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Paul. We seem to have lost Paul.
You're all good to continue?
Okay. Wondering if there are any questions online. S'il y a des questions sur Zoom. If you have a question, please use the raised hands feature so we can see that you have a question. S'il vous plaît, utilisez la fonction de lever la main si vous avez une question. Merci. I don't think we have any questions. Il n'y a pas de questions. So back to you, Victoria.
Thank you so much, Rosie. We have no questions from the ground today. This will conclude today's press conference with the leader of the Green Party of Canada, Annamie Paul.
Thank you very much.
Recording stopped.
Thank you very much. It seems that I covered the topic so comprehensively that they're stumped for words. So that's great. Thank you very much for being with us today. Merci beaucoup d'être ici avec nous aujourd'hui. And I look forward to seeing you at the next stop in this wonderful neighborhood. Thanks so much.
Thank you for joining us. This concludes today's press conference with the leader of the Green Party of Canada, Annamie Paul.